Hello, everyone. Shalom, shalom, and welcome to Shakti Fest Reunion. My name is Avraham Leader. I am a teacher of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and I live in Jerusalem, Israel. I have had the privilege of being at Bhakti Fest in Joshua Tree, California, and teaching there in the past. And now I'm really thrilled to be here with you at Shakti Fest Reunion and sharing some teachings with you virtually. We're in a very interesting time in human history right now, experiencing Corona. Actually, where I live in Israel, we've been in lockdown for the second time now because there's been a lot of cases of this plague going around here. Because of that, I'm doing this recording on Zoom, and the video quality is not as great as I would like, but I can't leave my house now. So I'm happy to be able to be doing this with you. One of the teachings in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism is that there are divine sparks in everything. Everything means not only physical objects, it means people, animals, situations, relationships, challenges. Everything we have an interface with in life actually conceals within it a divine spark. And I've been asking myself, what sort of positive divine sparks might there be in this corona, in this plague that we're experiencing? And one of the things that I have discovered as a teacher is that geography has become much less critical. All of a sudden, because I'm doing all my teaching now on Zoom, all of a sudden I can teach people in all different parts of Israel. They don't have to attend with their physical bodies. I'm teaching a couple groups in the United States, in England, in Australia, and I don't need to travel. And they can be in very different places in these countries. So with all the downsides, and I really want to bless everybody who is sick with a total and complete healing and recovery. And I also want to bless all those people whose livelihood has been adversely affected by this situation, that it should come back and they should be able to support themselves and have what they need. And at the same time, one of the things I've realized is that it enables us to come together. Here we are now at Shakti Fest Reunion, people all over the world, and without having to physically transport our bodies, we are sharing in this immersion into deep spiritual teachings and practices and music and all the wonderful things that are going on here. And another positive spark that I thought might exist in within this corona, something that we've learned about ourselves. We've learned that when we have no choice, when our backs are to the wall, we are capable of changing our habits and acting differently. I don't have to tell you, we go with masks, we keep social distance, we maybe don't travel as much as we were used to, and I can go on and on. So we learned about ourselves that we are capable of changing our habits. And that's good news, because it doesn't only have to be because of an external threat. We can change our habits for our own personal benefit, and we can change our habits as a community or even a global community for the benefit of the planet and humanity in general. This is something that we can definitely do. And this is, again, it's another way that we're able now to come together, not possibly in a way that we might have in the future. And so what I want to do with you today, with everyone who's participating here, is I want to speak with you about the divine feminine in Jewish, specifically Kabbalah, the tradition of Jewish mysticism. Okay, this is Shakti Fest then, and this is Shakti Fest reunion. And Shakti, as we know, is a name for the divine feminine. So I'm certain many of you have heard of her through Hindu tradition, through personal experience, through other world cultures. I want to talk with you specifically about how we perceive the divine feminine in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism. And I just would like to share with you that we're sort of going to be doing study. We're going to be doing some study. And in Jewish practice, study this is itself spiritual practice. In other words, I don't study only in order to obtain knowledge or get information that I will use at some point for my spiritual edification. The actual studying and looking at images and ideas and contemplating them is in itself an uplifting spiritual practice. So again, my hope and prayer is that in this short time that we're sharing together, that it should be for all of us an uplifting and heart-touching experience. And she is definitely in our heart. So let me begin by saying that, for us in Judaism, the first book we're going to be looking at to know anything about what we need to know about is the Bible. The Bible. And maybe some of you are familiar with the Bible. And if you look at the Bible, you are not going to find any mention of God in the feminine, of the divine feminine. It's always going to say he. And in fact, if you're going to find any mention of the divine and the feminine, it might be as some sort of an image or statue that in fact the Bible commands us to destroy if we should come upon it. So in Canaan, in ancient Canaan, there were a lot of goddess cults and goddess worship, and basically the Bible, as we usually understand it and as was transmitted to us through Moses, our teacher, is negative and not in favor of this sort of worship or any sort of worship, in fact, that was going on in Canaan at that time, other than the worship of the one God, which was very, very central to the Bible. So how can I even be talking? Where did I even get this idea that there is such a thing as the divine feminine? So the roots of my tradition and the tradition of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism in this matter, go back to about 2,000 years ago, to a very, very great master teacher and sage. We call him the divine Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai. The divine Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is the central character and teacher in what is maybe now considered the central book of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, the book Zohar, which means radiance or splendor. And most of the teachings and the great teacher and the great sage and the great avatar of this book is Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he actually taught two new things about the divine that we might not have known before he came along. He expanded our concept or our understanding of what, or better yet, who we call God. Now, again, going back to the Bible, and thinking about God in the Bible, I will find there what I could call the Jewish Christian God, the Jewish Christian God of the Old Testament, who has a bad temper, who can be compassionate, who communicates with Moses, who communicates later on with the prophets, and goes through some sort of divine evolution themselves. And that was the God that I grew up on as a child in California, Los Angeles, California, in the 1950s and then the 1960s when I was a teenager. And during that time, especially in Los Angeles, California, I started to hear about other ideas of God. And I heard about Buddhism, and they spoke about, for example, the nothingness, the great nothingness, rather than this very almost human-like personality. All of a sudden, I heard that God could be thought of as nothingness. And then I heard this very new idea that maybe God can also be addressed, what we call God can be addressed not only in the masculine, but also in the feminine. And I'm wondering to myself, this touched me very much when I heard these ideas, even as a young person. And I wondered, in my own tradition, the Jewish tradition, do we have anything like this? And I started learning this basic text of Jewish mysticism, the Zohar. Actually, to be honest, I wasn't really capable of reading it yet. It's in Aramaic, so I was reading books written on it at that time. And I discovered that this man, this great avatar, Rabbi Shimon, says, open up your conception and perception of the divine, because besides being this personal male God that we know from the Bible, the hidden wisdom teaches us that beyond any personification, we relate to God as the infinite, as the great oneness that has no separation, as nothingness, as fullness, and whatever other words are appropriate in this sense. And we also, this is amazing that Rabbi Shimon says this after no such discussion for 1,500 years in Jewish tradition. He says, we not only can, we should and must also relate and speak to God in the female tense. And where did he get this from? Okay, so I would say, where did he get it from? I would say, also being a bit of a Jungian myself, I would say because it's a basic truth, so it had to come out. It had to surface again at some point. It could not be kept repressed that long. It needed to come out. But Rabbi Shimon was not necessarily a Jungian, didn't think in these terms. So if you asked him, so where did you get this idea from? He would say, I got it from the Bible. Forget everything I just said until now that you can't find it in the Bible. He said, I got it from the Bible. And where did he get it from? So let me show you a verse. Let me just put it up on the screen here. Let me show you a verse that he believes gives us this very important and valuable information. Here we go. Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 27. Talking about the creation of human beings. This is what it says. God created human beings in God's own image. In the image of God, God, created Adam. Male and female, God created them. This is what it says, that human beings are created in God's image. And according to Rabbi Shimon, if human beings are created in God's image, this right away tells us two things. That something about this human form, let me say it this way. If I had a camera with which I could take a picture, a photograph of God, so it would come out looking something like a human being. Obviously, we're very physical, we're very material, and what we call God is very abstract and very spiritual and very anything that the opposite maybe of what we of physical and material. Yet, this form, this human form, we actually share with the divine. If the divine has a form, it is a human form. It might be like the relationship between a photograph and reality, okay? Reality is three-dimensional. You look at a picture, it's two-dimensional, yet there's something similar. In the same way, we are a picture, an image, a likeness of God. So first of all, that means that we have in ourselves the potential to become godlike because we share the form. We share the likeness. But this also tells us something else. It also tells us something else. If we want to research or investigate or get to know what we call God, because God, this is just a word. What does it mean? It's not my favorite word. I'm using it now because I'm not going to get into a whole discussion of what word I might like better. I'll tell you, you know what, I'll tell you. I prefer being rather than God. And in Hebrew, the real name for God is not what's translated as God and not Adonai. It's actually Havaya, Havaya, which means being. And I'm going to relate to that name a little bit later down. So I'm just going to, though, for the sake of having an easy discussion and conversation, so I am going to say God. So if we want to contemplate and research God, we need to contemplate the human being, and then we can reach some conclusions about godly nature. And so Rabbi Shimon says, the first thing that I notice about human nature, human beings, is that human beings were created male and female, according to the Bible. This verse that we just read says, male and female, he created them and called their name Adam, Adam. Adam, in fact, in Hebrew, we always think of Adam and Eve as a he and a her. In fact, Adam is a conglomerate word. It means both male and female. Number one, because the human race is male and female, and number two, because every person has male and female within them. You know, it's depending, there might be some external expression, but within, in different percentages, we all have male and female. So that is the nature of the human race, and therefore Rabbi Shimon says, this is also the nature of the divine. The divine is also male and female, and therefore, if we want to experience the completeness of the divine, we must also call God her, she. And that's the basis. And after Rabbi Shimon reveals this, almost every page of this book, Zohar, is talking about the Shekhinah, this divine female that we're going to be delving into a little bit today. So I first wanted you to know where this comes from. And the Hebrew word that we use to call her, we call her by many, many, many names. And I'll share a couple of those with you today. But the name that we call her is Shekhinah. Shekhinah means she who dwells, or she who is present, because she is the aspect of the Godhead who is closest to us in our understanding. She is earth. He is heaven. She is earth. She is, in a certain sense, humanity. In fact, there is a place in the Talmud, another book of Jewish wisdom, specifically in the Mishnah, specifically in the Ethics of the Fathers, that say that if 10 people meet together and speak holy words and contemplate spiritual ideas, then the Shekhinah, this divine female presence, rests between them. She dwells between them. In other words, she is also group soul. Whenever we have a meeting, if you meet even one other person, then the Shekhinah, this divine presence, is created. You know where she is? She's in the space between you. Let's say there's two people, there's air between you. She's there. If there's 10 people, and there's space between you, she's there. I want to say more. We're having a virtual meeting now at Shakti Fest Reunion with people from all over the world. And I would say now, everybody listening at any time to this particular lecture, and all the lectures and all the Shakti Fest reunion are sharing a Shekhinah, are sharing a divine shared soul, because she is always in the spaces that are between us, but also connect. Let me just share with you another verse, and you'll see where we got this word from. Exodus 25:8. It says, "And let them make me a sanctuary," this is what God says, "that I may dwell among them." The word for dwell is shachen. Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. I just did it in Hebrew. So the word v'shachanti, I will dwell, is shekhinah, dwelling, presence. She is holiness. She is sanctuary. She is tabernacle. She is the one who dwells with us, and in that sense is close to us. Okay, till now, all good and nice, and we can speak of her, and we know now that even in Jewish tradition, we speak of God as she and her, and we know that she's within us and everything that we've said until now. However, unfortunately, the story as we tell it in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, is much more complicated, complex, and even somewhat traumatic. Okay, and let me share this with you as best as I can in the short time that we have. We tell this story in many ways, and I'm going to share one way of telling it. Okay, so I said we have different names for her. One of the names for her, we call her Moon. She is Moon, okay? I mean the Jewish people, the Jewish tradition, we very, very much identify with the moon. We're not so much sun people. Of course, we love the sun, and we connected to the sun. Everyone on earth is. But really, basically, we identify with the moon. All our holidays have to do with the moon. We follow the moon's phases every month, and it affects us, everyone. It affects all of humanity. And we see her as the moon. He's the sun. When you say he is the sun, and she is the moon. You have this in many traditions. They are the divine couple, the sun and the moon. Okay. Now, on the fourth day of creation, God creates the sun and the moon. And what happened then? So let me take out my word form again, word file again, and share this with you. What happened on the fourth day of creation? Now look at this, what happened. It says, God made the two great lights, the greater light to dominate the day, and the lesser light to dominate the night and the stars. Please note, at the beginning of this verse, it says God made two great lights. Then all of a sudden we have a greater light and a lesser light. How did that happen? What happened? How did we get from two great lights to a greater light and a lesser light? Now, the two great lights, of course, are the sun and the moon. It's the sun, the moon, and the stars. So the greater light is the sun, and the smaller light is the moon. And the moon seems like, I mean, we know that also, the moon is smaller than the sun. And how did that happen? What transition was there here between being two great lights and between there being a greater light and a smaller light? So we have a book, I guess you can call it. It's actually comprised of 20 books and millions of pages of commentary. It's known as the Talmud, and this is wisdom of Jewish sages from about 200 to 16 or 1500 years ago, and it's all compiled in this work that's called the Talmud, and it has a lot of laws and instructions about how to live your daily life, and it also has a lot of legends. And this is a legend where God is having a conversation with the moon. And this is, at this time, they're still the same size, the sun and the moon. They're two great lights. And the moon comes to God and says, it's not a good idea that you have two kings and queens that are sharing one crown. you can't have two rulers. You can't have two rulers. God says, okay, moon, absolutely right. So go make yourself smaller. And that he gives her a command. And that's what she does. And then she comes sort of back to God after making herself smaller. And she says, you know, I said to you something that makes sense. It's really hard for two rulers to rule over the universe. I came from a sincere place saying that. Why was I punished? And God gives her all sorts of excuses and says, well, you know, he says, well, you can have as a compensation prize this or that. And everything he says to her, she's not satisfied with his answer. And at the end, God says, you know what? You're right. It was as if I sinned. This is something that I did by making the moon smaller, that in fact I need forgiveness. And every first day of the month, first day of the lunar month, that's the time when the moon first appears of the lunar month. So it's as if a time when not only do human beings need to be forgiven, but God needs to be forgiven. God needs to be forgiven for making the moon smaller. So what does this mean, making the moon smaller, making her smaller, making the feminine aspect of divinity smaller? It means many things, and this story is told in many different ways. Let me share a couple of them with you. One of them says like this: when we say she is smaller, we don't mean she's smaller than him. We mean that she goes through cycle. Sun, he basically has two options, on or off. During the day he's on, at night he's off. That's it. She is something different every day. The moon is a cycle. She goes from being tiny to actually being, she starts, there's a day when she's invisible and you can't see her at all. She goes from that to being full moon, 15th of the lunar month, and then she decreases, she increases, she decreases. So this interpretation says making her smaller is not about being smaller than the sun, but about being secular and going through changes. He, on and off. Her, constantly changing. She is the rose for us, who is constantly changing, going from one face to another face, one manifestation to another manifestation. For this reason, between you and me, the Kabbalists were primarily interested in the Shekhinah, are primarily interested in the Shekhinah, the divine face of God, because what can I say? She's much more interesting because of her constant changing and evolving. Okay, this is one explanation of this becoming smaller. Another interesting way of telling this story, I think an interesting way of telling this story, is that being smaller means that she became more material. She became more physical, or let me say that more exactly, more precisely. She left the heavenly realms of God and the angels and descended into material reality. She came down to the earth to be here with us and with the animals and with the plants and with the stones and with the air and with the water. She is very much also the sea and the water. And in this telling of the story, it wasn't that God punished her by saying, go make yourself smaller. It was more like God was reading her mind, where she said, look, you've created this world, and we, all these godly figures, God, male side of God, female side, angels, cherubs, whatever there might be in the heavens. So all the godly spiritual is in the heavens and the material is on earth. And she said, no, doesn't make sense. I want to go down and be with the human beings and be with nature and be with the seas. I want to be there so that they will be an expression and manifestation of God in the material world. So her becoming littler or more little or smaller actually means her descending into material plane where we have her with us. However, as I said, this is a complicated story because she is now separate from her partner, okay? Because we are thinking in terms of the divine couple, male and female, sun and moon, earth and water. Well, no, both of those are divine images, so that didn't work. So we'll just say moon and sun, earth and skies. That's what I want to say, the earth and the sky. But now they've become separated. There is distance between them. Okay, let me again show you something else. The divine name. I said I was going to talk about our name for God. So let me show this to you. Let me go back again to my, here we go. This is the name for God in Hebrew. Let me just move this down. Here we go. This is the name for God in Hebrew. It's comprised of the sounds Yah, Ha, Va, Ha. You might be familiar with the English version of this, Jehovah. This word, as I said, basically has no meaning. It's not true, not that it has no meaning, but it's not exactly a verb, it's not exactly a noun. It is most of all an expression of what we call in English being. But note that it's comprised of 4 letters in Hebrew. I did 4 letters for you in English. And one of the ways we see these 4 letters is as a divine family. The first letter, the Yud in Hebrew, the Y in English, is father. The second one, Ha, is mother. Third is son. Fourth, again, Ha, daughter. Okay? So we're not going to talk too much about father and mother. She, when we relate to the Shekhinah, to the divine feminine, we know her as mother, but we know her very much as daughter. And when I look at this part of the family, the son and the daughter, they are son and daughter, these 2 letters, okay? They are son and daughter. However, they are also, of course, brother and sister. And here's where it gets a little complicated. They are also partners. They're also a couple. They're also man and wife. So what has happened as a result of her leaving the heavens, coming down to being with us, is now they are separated or divorced, or she is banished, or she left of her own volition. As I said, this story is told in many different ways. And so reality for us, by us I say the students of the Kabbalah, reality, there is a basic separation, a basic distance in the very fabric of reality. She is separated from he. And because of this, one of our favorite expressions of emotion is longing, is yearning, because we sense this rend, we sense this separation, and we are yearning and we are longing for our lover. We are yearning and are longing for them to come together again. We are yearning, we are longing for the physical and the material and the spiritual not to be 2 separate entities, but to be able to really mesh and come together. If you read, again, I'm going back to the Bible, Song of Songs. If you get a chance, read Song of Songs. Beautiful love story, beautiful love story. You know, the Bible did not come down from heaven, all the books, the prophets, and everything there is in there. And at a certain point, these sages that I mentioned earlier, the sages of the Talmud, 2,000, 1,500 years ago, whatever, they had to decide, like they had to be editors and decide what books go into the canon, what books become part of the Bible. And about the Song of Songs, that was a really big argument among these sages, because most of the sages said the Song of Songs, that's like for playing at bars. That's like bar music. This is like, love stories. You don't put that into the Bible. And then there was one sage, Rabbi Akiva, who he came along and he said, I say to you, if all the books of the Bible are holy, the book of Song of Songs is the holy of holies. It is the most holy, because it tells us the story of the divine couple. And nothing is holier than that. Nothing is holier than the coming together of opposites, than the merger of male and female, that they should become one after being individuated as separate beings, okay? We don't just want the primal union, the primal oneness. We want that we want for things, each one to realize themselves as a fully individuated conscious being, and then from that sense of self to come together with what we perceive as external to us, okay? So the story of lovers is the holiest. It's the holy of holies. Nothing is more sacred, more important to us than that story. However, if you read the Song of Songs, there's monologues of the male. There's monologues of the female. I don't think you can find one moment in that book when they're actually together. Okay, that's why I said longing, yearning, such an important spiritual practice, because we sense the separation at the same time that we are aspiring to bring them together. And in fact, for the Kabbalists, all of their work, all of their spiritual practice is in fact geared towards one purpose, I could say in a certain way, which is bringing these two together. In Kabbalistic tradition, before you do any practice, any spiritual practice, you say in Aramaic, L'shem yichud kudsha brichu shchinte, which roughly translated means for the sake of bringing the male aspect and the female aspect of divinity together. Again, they retain who they are. They don't just become an amorphous one, but they become a whole. A whole. A whole is created by two sides coming together. And everything that the holy people do, the righteous people, the tzaddikim we call them, everything that they do is actually geared, the intention of it is to create this unity and bring together that which was separate. Again, in this coming together, we very much identify with the female side. Strangely enough, looking at, if you just look externally at Jewish religion, you might not know this, but in the mystical tradition, our primary identification is with her because she's here with us, as I said earlier. And in fact, the tzaddikim, the holy ones, are often called the Shechina girls. Their work is to be with her, to dress her, to choose jewelry for her, and to support her. And because it's not easy for her, that's another thing. Again, I can't get into it too much, but it's also not easy for her being with us. that is to say with humanity. Number one, because we often misbehave. And the Shekhinah, the divine feminine in our tradition, she does have a Kali face. She definitely can have, she is also destruction. She can also look at us and fire comes out of her eyes and consumes us. And we try to avoid that, of course, because, you know, we don't want humanity destroyed. So she has that aspect because it's not always easy for her to be with us. And it's not always easy for her to be away, as I said before, from her lover. So we are comforting her, and we are also trying to facilitate her union. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the expression tikkun olam, this word tikkun, which is generally translated as fixing. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that even President Obama once or a few times used this expression. He talked about tikkun olam, this fixing of the world. Tikkun, that's the word. Tikkun, translated as fixing. Actually, that's not what the word means. Tikkun, which comes from the Zohar and which comes from Aramaic more, the source of it in the Kabbalah, because this is used as a Kabbalistic concept. The word tikkun actually means dress or clothing, garment, or jewelry. The fixing, what's used to say fixing, the tikkun, actually starts from a much more mythical, vivid picture of us, human beings, because we're all holy, not just the tzaddikim, the righteous. We're all potentially righteous. So us as human beings, our work is to be dressing the Shekhinah, creating garments for her, putting jewelry on her, and that's called tikkun, because how do we do this? How do we dress her? How do we find jewelry for her? How do we make her beautiful? We do so by our deeds, our good deeds. That's how it got to mean fixing what's wrong in the world, because that's one way of many ways of how we enhance the Shekhinah, the divine feminine. In fact, according to our understanding, our voyage of study about her today, what we are doing together at this moment at Shakti Fest Reunion is actually a form of making a tikkun, of dressing, of giving jewelry, of enhancing, of making the Shekhinah beautiful. So I want to share with you a take on this idea of making clothes from the Shekhinah by a very, very great and special and unique and brilliant and creative Jewish wise man who lived about 200 years ago. Maybe some of you have heard of him. His name is Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And he told a short story about this, which I'm going to read to you. I'm reading it in Hebrew, and I'm going to do a simultaneous translation into English. I'm just going to sort of share it with you. I'm not going to analyze it too much. I just want to listen. I want you to listen to it and take it with you. Storytelling is also a major part of our tradition, especially for this wise man that I'm speaking about now, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He did a lot of storytelling, and he believed that when you give over wisdom by telling story, not just by talking about ideas, that it touches the soul and the heart in an entirely different way than just trying to comprehend or understand with our minds. It sinks in differently. So it also leaves you sometimes with more questions than answers. But we like that because questions, good questions, open up. Answers, people looking for answers, I say answers, they close you up. Answers, it shuts things down. Questions open things up. So even if you get some good answers, wait for the next questions to come along. Okay, so let me read this story to you. So here's what Rabbi Nachman says. Once the moon came and complained to the sun, because the sun is around during the day and during the summer, while she has to do her job during the winter, during the long nights, when it's very cold. She came and complained to the sun. And the sun was trying to appease her and make her feel better. And he said, you know what? Let me make a dress for you. Let me make a new piece of clothing for you. And so he called all the tailors that they should make a dress for the moon. And, he got like the best fashion designers from Paris. However, the smaller tailors, the less famous one, they also wanted to come to try to make a dress for the moon. And they said, well, since he hasn't invited us, I guess we can't come. But they went anyway, and well, not they went anyway. They came, and then it was said that I guess the big tailors were trying to make the dress for the moon, and they said, look, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to make the dress for her, because sometimes she's small and sometimes she's big. Remember what I said before? The moon, she's always changing. So how can you make clothes for her? She's something different every day. So it's impossible to get the right size. And then the small ones, the less important or the less famous tailors or fashion designers came along, and they said, we know how to make clothes for her. And they said to them, if the great famous tailors, fashion designers, don't know how to make clothes for the moon, how could you? And the story ends here. We don't have an answer to this question. Were the little tailors able to do it? We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Why were the little ones able to do when the big ones weren't? Maybe the big ones only know the secret of being big, but they don't know the secret of how to be small and then big again and be big and then be small again. I don't know. I'm leaving you with the story. And since we've done a few biblical verses, I would like to conclude with a prophecy from the book of Isaiah. Let me get it out here again. Okay, we gotta go up. Here we go. Isaiah says, in the end of days, and the light of the moon shall become like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall become sevenfold, like the light of the 7 days, when the Lord binds up his people's wounds and heals the injuries the people have suffered. Okay, so actually when I chose this verse, I was thinking about the moon, how the moon was going to become as great as the sun, and their shared light is like the light of the 7 days of creation, because we have a tradition that the light that we experience now is not the first original light. This was it's almost like a dim reflection. The real light, the first light, is much greater than this light. We just don't have the vessels to be able to contain it. Maybe that's why they call people enlightened, certain people, or there are moments in my understanding when everyone could be enlightened, because then we experience the light of what's called here the 7 days of creation. And the prophet says, this voyage, this journey of the moon, when her light became smaller, it's only part of the journey, because at the end of time, her light and the sun's light will be the same, and their shared light will be as great as the original light. And that is what we are going towards, and that is what we are assisting. And in fact, in the end of days, as she had said originally, there will be 2 rulers. In fact, all will be rulers. There will be no more hierarchy. We won't need hierarchy. That is the journey. That is where we are going. And that's why I chose this verse. And I didn't even notice at the end of the verse, look what it says. The end of the verse says, the Lord binds up his people wounds and heals the injuries. So this is exactly a blessing for our time now, that we're looking, we're asking for the healing. So the healing, the tikkun, as I said before, the healing and the tikkun, it's manyfold. It's manifold. It is a healing of the soul and is a healing of the body. So once again, I want to pray for the healing of the earth and the passing of this plague. And I want to also ask for the coming together of male and female in the universe, between people, and within each and every one of us, because as I said before, don't just think of this in binary terms, because it's much more blurred than that. It's all coming together in one person, between people. It's infinite, this thing. So thank you very much for being with me, and I hope in the future we can meet also in this physical material body, because we love them, we love this physical reality, and be able to see and experience our three-dimensional faces and bodies. So shalom, shalom, peace to all, blessings to all, shalom, goodbye.